Hello and welcome to the Funding Your Studies presentation. My name is Richard Scrace and I work for the Falmouth and Exeter Students' Union, for which I'm the Advice Service Manager. And this slide just sets out an overview of what I propose talking about for the next sort of 15 or 20 minutes. And there you are, 4 bullet points: expenditure, where I'll be covering fees and living costs, tuition fees that is, income, primarily focusing on student loans, how to apply for student loans and how to repay those student loans. And we'll also touch on other sources of money that might be available for you. Okay, starting then with tuition fees, 21-22 academic year. And the tuition fee for the standard undergraduate course this year, starting September, is £9,250 in much the same way as it has been for the last few years now. All UK students can take out a tuition fee loan regardless of household income, so that's a non-means tested loan, and so can EU students with settled or pre-settled status. They too can take out a tuition fee loan, but that's a significant post-Brexit change for EU nationals who come to study at university. You can only receive a tuition fees loan in circumstances where you have settled or pre-settled status, and I'll give you some information about that in a bit more detail in just a moment. Some of you may study courses that involve a year abroad or a work placement, and there's a capped fee, a reduced fee for those years, but similarly you are entitled to take out a tuition fee loan for the relevant amount. So EU students and this post-Brexit change, if you're starting a course on or after the 1st of August, as you would be if you were starting an undergraduate course in September, then you must have settled or pre-settled status under the EU settlement scheme in order to get student finance. If you're coming to the UK from the 1st of January 2021, so just a couple of months ago, you may need to apply for a visa to study here. Major change. Doesn't apply to Irish citizens. A little bit about the EU settlement scheme itself. So if you're an EU, an EEA or Swiss citizen, you and your family can apply to the settlement scheme to continue living in the UK after the 30th of June this year. And if your application is successful, you'll get one of those two status, settled or pre-settled. The deadline for applying is the 30th of June this year, and ordinarily you must have started living in the UK by the 31st of December 2020. So it's a significant, important change for students who are EU nationals from this year. Okay, moving along to living costs, and this table I think is quite a helpful table. It's an indication of the sorts of costs that you're likely to incur. It's not intended to be definitive. These are not the precise sums of money that you will incur by way of costs, living costs, but they're a general indication of what those costs might be. Certainly the costs in the dark blue column on the left, you're likely to incur those. The actual amounts will differ from student to student. And when I present this slide, then I'm always inclined to just refer quickly to the amount at the top against accommodation and the amount at the bottom against total. And you'll see that accommodation is likely to amount to more than half of your total expenditure. So making a saving in your accommodation, a percentage saving of whatever, might have quite a significant impact on your finances overall if you can make a saving. And the 10,870 down the bottom there, so general indication perhaps around £11,000, and that's more than the maximum student loan. So perhaps you'll need to be thinking about how you might make some savings or where you might be able to get a bit of extra money from. Okay, so the primary source of funding for most students for their living costs is a maintenance loan. And this table sets out the position for maintenance loans for each of the home nations: England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, but only England's got the amounts that will be available for the 2021-22 academic year published at the moment. So the other ones I've got in last year's amounts, or current year as it happens. So just focusing on England then, and a means tested loan of up to £9,488, reduced amount if living at home during the academic year, and of whichever of those scenarios is relevant to you, whether living away from home or living at home, £4,289 is non-means assessed. So subject to satisfying the eligibility criteria, that £4,289 is an entitlement, just as the tuition fee loan is an entitlement. Just touching briefly on one of the university bursaries, and that's the Access to Exeter bursary, which is intended to assist access to the University of Exeter for students from low-income families. And the Access to Exeter bursary has two bands to it. And the first of those is household income of up to £16,000 per annum. And in year one, a student in those circumstances would be entitled to an Access to Exeter bursary of £2,100 towards living costs, and year two onwards, £1,550. And the bursary is paid in 3 instalments through the academic year, in October, January and May, in amounts of 40%, 40% and 20%. So £840 in each of October and January, £420 in May for year one. And you can see from the table there, or from the slide rather, how it pans out for year two onwards. And then the second band is a slightly higher income band, so over £16,000 up to £25,000 per annum. And at all years of the course, it's the rate of the bursary is £1,050. So I just brought that slide in, or those two slides in, because they're an indication of how that gap that I referred to in the living costs slide might be met, or at least partially met. But if we just return then to student loans and the application and assessment process, and this is focusing on the application process for Student Finance England. So that's students resident, or prospective students resident in England rather than the other home nations, but it's broadly the same for the other home nations as well. So it's an online application process. For England, it's through Student Finance England, it's .gov.uk site, and you'll find it very easily if you search on Student Finance England, or just SF for Finance E. The eligibility criteria include ordinary residence in the UK, and that's having been resident in the UK as a main or normal place of residence for the 3 years up to the 1st of September 2021 for a course starting this year. And there also it's also a criterion which relates to previous study, and if you've studied at higher education previously, so before starting the course that you want to join the University of Exeter for, it may affect your entitlement to a tuition fees loan. The details around all of that get a little bit, not necessarily complicated, but it's always worth looking at particular individual circumstances. So if you think that might affect you, what I suggest you do is when we get to the last slide, that has my email address on it, and you can just pick up my email address from there and email me, and we can discuss your specific circumstances there. How much a student gets by way of maintenance loan is, for most, it's determined by reference to household income, and the relevant tax year is, for this coming academic year 2021-22, the relevant tax year is 2019-20, and the amount is gross taxable income in that year. If, however, there's a change in income, change in household income, that can affect in year your entitlement to the amount of student maintenance loan you can borrow. So if, for instance, the 2019-20 there were perhaps 2 people employed in the household, but now there's only 1. So there's been a reduction in household income. If that reduction is 15% or more, then rather than being assessed for your entitlement by reference to that old tax year, the 2019-21, you could be assessed by reference to current year. I should just add there that if you're aged over 25 on 1st September, or you can demonstrate that you've been independent for 3 years or more by that same date, then you can be assessed independently rather than by reference to household income. As regards application dates, application for student loans, in most years, the application process is open by now, but it's delayed this year. And as I understand it, like lots of things, it's been affected by pandemic and whatever the process, whatever particular impact it's had, it's slowed things down. But I do anticipate that the application process will open very soon now. So keep a lookout for that. Common to most loans is that they have to be repaid, and the tuition fee and maintenance loans no different in that respect. When will you start repaying? Well, you'll start repaying starting in April after leaving your course, and when earning £26,575 per annum or more. At least that's the threshold right now. How do you make those repayments? Well, they're deducted at source, by which I mean they'll be deducted directly from wages in the same way that income tax and national insurance is deducted by employers. And how much? You'll have deducted 9% of your earnings over that threshold, over the £26,575 per annum. Of course, for you, if you start a 3-year course this September, you'll expect to finish that ordinarily summer of 2024, so that you'd start repaying in the April of 2025. And by that time, that threshold might have changed. But the table below there is using the current threshold, gives you a clear indication of the amounts, the actual impact per month for those different salaries that I've set out, 30,000, 35,000, 55,000, what your monthly repayments would be at the moment. Again, in common with most loans, is interest is applied to a student loan, be it tuition fees loan or maintenance loan, and the rates are potentially different while you're studying and after you finish the course and started to repay. So the interest rate while studying through until April after leaving the course is RPI, that's retail price index, plus 3%. So the retail price index that's based on at the moment is 2.6%. So that gives a total interest rate of 5.6% during the current academic year. As regards what happens once you start repaying, so the April, I suggested 2025 as an indicator, what might well be for you. Again, currently, because RPI is 2.6%, currently the interest rate for someone where income is 26,575 or less, the interest rate charged is RPI only, so it's 2.6%, and that rises on a sliding scale up to RPI plus 3%, so up to a maximum currently of 5.6%, where income is over 47,835. And of course, that upper threshold could change as well by April of 2025. Other sources of money that might be available to you, household or parental contribution, implicit in the maintenance loan setup, whereby your entitlement is established by reference to household income. Implicit in that is sort of an expectation that if you don't get the full amount, then the household will top up. It isn't quite as straightforward as that, because the reality for some households, in fact quite a number of households, is that money is tight and they're simply not in a position to top up in that way. But that's implied into the system that's operated. Quite a lot of students will work part-time, or on a temporary basis, be that in vacations or in term time. It's been difficult for students who wanted to work and in previous years have worked. It's been difficult for them in the last 12 months, and might be for a few months yet, but with a bit of luck, by the time you start, part-time and vacation employment opportunities might start to open up in the way that they were available pre-pandemic. Another source of money is an overdraft through a student bank account, and it's an overdraft is not to be abused, really. If it's used effectively, if it's used well, it can be a really effective means of managing cash flow. If, on the other hand, all someone who's got an overdraft facility does is blow it in one or two big payments, then you've derived whatever benefit you're going to get from it pretty quickly, and it's not then available for you to get over those lean times that might arise, particularly at the end of term. The university operates what it calls its Success for All Fund, which is a sort of hardship fund, really. But it's not something that a student can take for granted that they will necessarily get just because they've fallen into hardship. It's intended to meet circumstances where whatever has arisen was unforeseen. And within that, there's an expectation that when starting a course, the student has done a bit of planning and at least starts on the basis that they're satisfied that they've got sufficient money to see themselves through, to meet all their costs through the year. If they haven't, and there's no prospect of them getting them, having enough money to see themselves through the year, then it's possible that the Success for All Fund won't come to that student's rescue. The university also operates various other scholarships and grants, or can assist in access to them. And rather than me going into the detail of each and every one of them now, which would take rather a long time, better that you simply go to the university's website, and in the search box on that site, if you just type in funding database, it will take you to it, and you can see what might be available there. There's also additional support available for particular groups of students. And in this slide, I've just headed up some of those. So students with disabilities might well be eligible to receive disabled student allowance. And if I give an example of where that might be available and applied, if, for instance, a student has a disability and a diagnosis of dyslexia, then there might be various assistive technologies, for instance, which can be provided to that student, and they might be funded through the Disabled Student Allowance. And the DSA, Disabled Student Allowance, is applied for when you apply, or at least through the student loan process that you'll apply for your main maintenance loan and tuition fees loan through. Then also students with children or dependents. So there's a parent's learning allowance of up to £1,821, childcare grant of up to 85% of childcare costs, with certain ceilings to that. So there's a maximum you can get of £179.62 per week for one child, rising to just short of £310 for two or more children, and an adult dependence grant of up to £3,190. So I emphasise those are all grants. They're non-repayable. And as regards care leavers, the university applies a full fee waiver to care leavers. So that's waiving the fee of £9,250. A care leaver is almost certainly going to be entitled to the maximum student maintenance loan, which would in turn create eligibility to receive the Access to Exeter bursary that I referred to earlier on. And in addition, is entitled or eligible to apply for additional support through the university's Care Leavers bursary. And this slide just sets out some useful sources of information that you might want to tap into. And these are all in relation to students who are resident in England. The other home agencies will have their own equivalents of these sources of information. If you go to their sites, you'll find them. And probably these slides will be made available to you after the open day, and so you'll be able to pick up those click-throughs, those links then. And there we are, that comes to an end. And ordinarily, if we were doing this in person, there'd be an opportunity for you to ask me questions right now in person, but you might be able, there will be a facility for you to ask questions during the open day. And if you're looking at this after the open day or don't have a question right now, but think you might, or there's a possibility that you might in future, then just jot down my email address there, richard.scrace@thesu.org.uk. Please do send me any questions that are on your mind, and I'll do what I can to respond to them. So I hope you've found that of use, and when you join Exeter in September, very best of luck to all of you. Thanks. Bye-bye.